On today's Technobabble, calibrating your stage television.
This is Tech No Babble, your weekly source for church video and graphics news, perspectives, tips, and tricks. And now here's your host, Paul Clifford.
Hi, and welcome again to another episode of Technobabble. This is the show where every week I help you with video and graphic design for your church. My name is Paul Allen Clifford. So in previous weeks, we've talked about using a stage television to augment what your pastor is doing. But there's one thing that I haven't touched on, actually a couple, but today I want to talk about how to change the settings on the stage television so that they're best for viewing. Now, the first thing you need to realize is your eye is different from a camera. So when we have a stage television, it's pretty small actually. So we need to use IMAG, image magnification, to make it larger. So you need to send that through a camera. Now, the exception to this would be in a particularly small room, let's say 50 or less people. Not necessary. But if you have a larger room, then you're probably going to need IMAG for this technique to work. Keeping in mind that I just looked this up actually. Someone was asking if he could replace their screens with 65-inch or less televisions. Well, I looked it up, and the most liberal suggestion said that a 65-inch television is great within 13 feet of the display. Well, his room was 60 feet. So really, in order to make it work, he would need to put in 3 tiered sets of 65-inch televisions. 4 would probably be better. And depending on the width of the room, maybe 2. So maybe a total of 8, and that just eats up any savings of going to a television. So the reason that I told you all that is a stage television will need, for most situations, to be shown through a camera. But, as I say, your eye is different from a camera. You have firmware, we're going to call it that, but it's actually just something that God did in our brains, that automatically changes white balance. So when you're around a campfire, you see white. When you're in full daylight, you see white. When you're in incandescent light, you see white. But all 3 of those are different colors of light that our brains automatically adjust to. Cameras do not do that unless they have an automatic white balance setting, but the automatic white balance setting, it can be iffy at best. So, when we're showing a monitor, like I am right here, you need to make allowances for that fact. First off, make sure that your camera is white balanced correctly. Next, you need to make sure that the television is calibrated correctly. Now, you might not know exactly how that works, but that's why I have color bars here on this monitor, is because basically that's the tool that you use. Now, this is actually playing an hour-long color bars movie from YouTube. Color bars being something that you can use pretty standardly in video production. I don't see a problem with that. I'll link to this video. What you should know, though, is normally to do calibration, you need either a monitor that has this appropriate setting, or you need one of these. This is a blue filter that you can look through to see if the monitor is calibrated correctly. I did this before I started the recording, and let me just show you a little something that you may not know about color bars. Looking through a blue filter, this bar, the blue and the magenta will look the same. This blue, this magenta and this blue will look the same as well, and the white and the blue and the white and the blue and the white will look the same as the blue and the magenta, the blue and the magenta. It will filter out all the color on these bars, so when you're looking through a blue filter, you'll see a solid blue line, solid black line, solid blue line, solid black line, solid blue line, solid black line, solid blue line. If you don't, then you just have to change the hue and the saturation settings on your monitor until they match. And those interact with each other. So hue changes the range of color that we're dealing with. Saturation changes how much color that we're dealing with. And most of the time manufacturers bump up the saturation to make the picture look more vivid in the store under iffy incandescent or fluorescent lights. So this is something that you'll need to change. So that's one part of the test bar pattern. Another part is what we call plugge. And plugge is measured in the white area here and the 3 black bars right here. And you're thinking, there are 3? Yeah, there are. There is a black bar, a blacker than black bar, and then a not as black bar that's kind of a dark gray. So you need to adjust the blacker than black and the black to where they're the same, but not so much that the gray one becomes washed out or it becomes black. So that's what those 3 are for. The white bar here is so that you can turn up the brightness and contrast, which is also what you do with the 3 black bars. You adjust the brightness and contrast so that you get enough white that you don't get blooming where the white goes outside of its border. So you turn that up. But you also don't want the blacker than black bar to show up more black than the black bar. I know, very confusing, but let me give you a resource, and I'll leave a link to this in the show notes. This is a Video Essentials DVD that I use to calibrate my displays. This is something I've had for years and years, probably 15 years. So I really ought to get a Blu-ray version, but this still works. But it comes with the little blue film. In fact, you probably heard the clicking. That was me sliding the little blue film back in here and shutting the DVD. And it gives you all the instructions that you need to set it up. So that's step 1, is getting it to a standard kind of formulation. Set up the settings to where they're standard. Step 2, compare what your eye sees with what the projector, which we're going to assume is also set to a standard, what the projector displays, so that they're as close as possible. So this is something that I noticed for the first time when I worked in local television, and that they would have the anchor standing by a television and, referring to a news story or something like that. And they started off by setting the television to the standard, but then they set it so that it looked better on television. Maybe not so much in real life, but there was half a dozen people that saw it in real life, whereas the viewership over the entire area saw it over television. So it was more important. in your situation with your church where your pastor is on stage next to the stage television, people have their eyes. They also have their eyes to look at the screen. So you want to balance these two things so that they're on average about the same. You don't want to make the real life television look washed out or way too saturated or way too desaturated. You don't want to make the projection washed out, too saturated, too desaturated, or even worse, the wrong colors. You need to make kind of an average of the two so that they tend to match as closely as possible. Now, you're probably never going to get it 100%, but I would start with the standards and then tweak from there to get as close as possible. Now, if you're on standard definition still, you're going to have a harder time than HD because standard definition has a lower contrast ratio. There's less distance between the brightest signal and the darkest signal. Same for, so with an HD signal, you're going to have more to work with. So keep that in mind as you're setting all this up. Well, I hope that was helpful to you. We talked all about setting up a monitor for the standard calibration and then the steps you would take to recalibrate it so that it works well for your eyes. If you like this content, there's tons more like it at trinitydigitalmedia.com. So head over there and take a look. And while you're there, go ahead and sign up for my email newsletter. It's located at trinitydigitalmedia.com/newsletter. Until next time, this is Paul Allen Clifford with trinitydigitalmedia.com. Go out and change eternity. Technobabble, Paul here. I just wanted to remind you that if you were to go ahead and subscribe to this channel and click on the little bell icon to get notifications, there are some contests coming and the prizes are going to be pretty cool. So go ahead and do that now.